It's hard to believe, but fifth gear is now 20 years old. So to celebrate the occasion, we've come up with some rather special shootouts involving cars that got us all excited back in 2002, and then putting them up against their modern-day counterparts around the track. This time we've dug out old and new versions of the world's most recognisable and most enduring sports car, the Porsche 911. 2 decades ago, we got our hands on what was then the flagship model, the Turbo. It was a proper monster that saw off virtually every other supercar of the era, so not surprisingly, we liked it a lot. But just how good is it today? For example, how would it stack up against a modern 911? To find out, we thought we'd put it up against this, a 2022 Carrera. Yes, it's the cheapest, least powerful model you can currently buy.
In other words, has the 911 improved so much that the entry-level model can beat the creme de la creme version from way back when?
We'll start with the Turbo.
Incredibly, the Porsche 911 is nearly 60 years old, and over that time it's been constantly evolving. However, to the untrained eye, one 911 looks pretty similar to another, so Porsche give it a generation code.
This 2002 car is a 996 model, and I should know because I used to own one.
Mine was in blue, and I loved it, but it wasn't the prettiest 911. They did away with the round headlights, and they went for these odd-shaped lights which cut into the bonnet. Some people referred to them as fried eggs, but God, it drives well. Yeah, I mean, this Turbo's done what, 39,000 miles? Feels so tight. The one part about all of them which has remained actually epic throughout the whole range is the steering, and this is, no exception. I mean, it's beautiful. It's pinpoint accurate. The cabin is so airy. I've got great visibility. The seating position's great. I feel under the steering wheel. I feel connected. Gear change is really lovely. I mean, it's just great.
And apart from the styling, the 996 made its mark for other reasons, because the famous flat 6 air-cooled engine had been replaced by a flat 6 water-cooled one. Horror of horrors. But Porsche, well, they had no choice.
Performance of the air-cooled engine, do you know what? It just kind of reached its limit. It also came under pressure from, emissions and noise legislation. It just simply had to go. In fact, the only parts which were carried over from the last of the air-cooled cars was the suspension and the gearbox.
But the gains in performance were considerable, particularly when this was written on the back.
For starters, behind me I've got a twin-turbo 3.6 litre, kicking out 420 horsepower.
In a body weighing 1,540 kilos, and with a slippery drag coefficient of just 0.3, that was good enough to reach 189 miles an hour.
Yeah, with its really fat, grippy tyres and four-wheel drive system, it's got to 60 in a tad over 4 seconds. Rapid.
But now, a little word of warning.
For years, 911s had a bit of a sting in the tail, and that is, rear engine, the heavy bit, is right out the back. And if you ever went over the limit and the rear started to move around, you really had to be on your A game, because if you overcorrect a slide and they snap back, they can spit you off the other way.
By the time this car came along, Porsche had found some clever software to calm things down just a bit.
However, in the rain, give it too much, she'll bite you.
Fortunately, the track is fairly dry today, so I can crack on.
Concentrate, get the power on. Okay, time for a hot lap. Start the watch. A little bit of understeer, JB power on. Ooh, a little wag of the tail, nice. Ooh, ooh, ooh. 20 years old. Oh, it's moving, she's floating. Right, stop the watch.
The 911 Turbo crosses the line in 47.79 seconds. Time for the upstart.
So, welcome to the 2022 Porsche 911. Anyone want to have a guess what the model designation is? Well, in a moment of total clarity, Porsche named this the 992.
That's a lower number than the car I've just driven. And in case you were wondering, there's no apparent logic to the numbering system. Porsche seemed to just pick a code at random. But never mind that. What's a modern-day Carrera all about?
For starters, this entry-level model will cost you £87,000, which, interestingly enough, is exactly what the Turbo cost way back when.
For that, you get 385 horsepower, so 35 less than the Turbo. However, it's 60 kilos lighter, so it reaches 62 in exactly the same 4.2 seconds. And how does it produce this power?
Well, it might not be badged a turbo, but that doesn't mean to say it's normally aspirated. Its 3-litre flat six has got twin turbochargers on, just like the original Turbo. Listen to this engine, listen. Oh my God, it's just mega. Now this car is rear-wheel drive, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't put its power down effectively, because it's quite a lot of, space-age electronics in here to assist, and also weight distribution's better than it used to be. It does give a really pure feel when driving it. You've got to think about it, particularly if you've got traction control turned off. But it's not edgy, it just needs a little bit of thought, which is part of the fun, eh? It's absolutely beautiful to drive. It's precise, it's got amazing grip, the brakes are phenomenal. I have to say, almost perfect. It's very difficult to even fault anything on this car. Everything just works so beautifully. I tell you what, it's quick, it's really quick.
But will it be quicker than the Turbo?
Predictions, I mean, it's going to be a bit better everywhere. Anyway, let's give it a go. All right, let's start the watch. Nice and smooth.
Incredibly, by the first checkpoint, the Carrera is already 1.3 seconds in front. And by the second checkpoint, that lead has stretched to 2.3 seconds.
Oh, it's definitely quicker. Stop the watch.
The Carrera crosses the line in 44.73 seconds, a full 3 seconds quicker than the Turbo. That's massive considering our track is under a mile long, and just goes to show how far the 911 has come in 20 years. The 996 Turbo is an iconic car, but if it's fast you're after, well, then there's no substitute for younger legs.
This time, the only way is Essex as we try out two fast Fords, the Focus ST170 and the Focus ST280. When the ST170 was launched 2 decades ago, it was the quickest Focus on sale. So we dispatched a rather fresh-faced presenter to discover what it was all about.
The boys have tweaked the chassis and stiffened the suspension to splendid effect.
Moving briskly forward to 2022, and it's another ST that currently holds the fastest Focus crown. My younger self will just explain what ST stands for.
ST stands for Sports Technologies.
Oh, beautifully delivered. Right then, down to business, and we will start by climbing into the time tunnel.
When Ford decided to replace the evergreen Escort, the car it came up with was the Focus. In 1998, the humdrum design of its predecessor was replaced by sharp lines and shapes that Ford called New Edge. I loved it then, and I love it now.
And it wasn't just the bodywork where revolutionary thinking had been applied.
Take the rear suspension, which is a complex multi-link one. It had previously been deemed too expensive to put on affordable family cars, but Ford came up with a way to manufacture it for less and was so pleased with the result that it was given a special name, Control Blade.
It certainly worked because the Focus received universal acclaim for the way it handled.
I remember driving this car when it was first launched and was really impressed with its comfortable ride, yet its ability to tuck its way into a bend and just give you a sense of total fun. In fact, the chassis was so good that it screamed out for more power. However, fast Ford fans had to wait until 2002 before Ford finally gave the Focus some fizz.
And ST170 was it.
As the name implies, the car's got 170 brake horsepower from a 2-litre 4-cylinder, normally aspirated engine, and it powers the front wheels and goes through a 6-speed gearbox.
That all combines to achieve a 0 to 62 time of 8.2 seconds.
The acceleration is smooth and progressive and strong, but it doesn't exactly rip the tarmac up behind it.
And its top speed of 134 miles an hour was hardly groundbreaking either, but maybe that's being a bit unfair to the ST because at £16,000 it was relatively affordable. And for many owners there was another advantage because the ST's relative anonymity meant it didn't attract the attention of thieves like some other fast Fords did. In fact, the only visual changes to a stock Focus were some different wheels, front lights and grille. And that tiny badge on the rear. The red and white decals on this car are an addition. And the ST170 has another plus point.
Weight. This car weighs just over 1,200 kilograms.
So, in spite of its age, it should be sprightly.
Time to set a fast lap. The agility of this car is what is screaming out to me. It's not the fastest thing going down this straight. I'm barely reaching 85 miles an hour.
But then you get to the twisty stuff.
Oh, it just tucks itself in so sweetly. Just putting it through that left, right, that is lovely. The grip it's got is really good. Today is a greasy track, it's still raining, but it's planting itself so well. It is pinpoint accuracy. I love it. Oh, what fun, what fun, what fun. Okay, here comes the finish line.
The Focus ST170 completes the lap in 57.79 seconds. Time for its big brother.
Now we skip forward to the latest ST.
So, what have 2 decades done to the car?
The years have added 20 grand to the price. This car costs £37,000, but you do get a lot of bang for your buck.
For example, I now have a 2.3-litre engine up front with a turbo attached, and that produces 280 horsepower, which is 65% more than the old ST.
However, it is 230 kilograms heavier, which is the same weight as 3 big lads, and you can definitely feel that extra weight. Everything just feels bigger, but I do get a slightly better seating position here because of the multi-adjustments available, whereas in the ST170 you sit quite high and quite close to the roof. Even me, and I'm a squiddly diddly person.
Bulky it might be, but the power-to-weight ratio is still massively in the new car's favour at 195 horsepower per tonne. That's 55 horsepower per tonne more than the 170.
So it's not surprising then that the ST280 can hit 62 miles an hour in 5.7 seconds, which is 2.5 seconds quicker
And classroom bragging rights don't end there, because this car has over double the torque at 415 Newton meters. And being bang up to date, it's like Heston Blumenthal's kitchen when it comes to tech.
There's an electronic slip diff, a pump that increases the brake pressure if fade is detected, and adaptive damping. Though charmingly, it still uses the same suspension design as the older ST.
So, how quick will it be?
I know what you're thinking. Unless 6 inches of snow falls upon this circuit, there is no way that this car will lose to the old one. But this exercise really is just to show how 20 years have affected the Focus's overall handling and speed. Start the clock. I mean, instantly quicker. Up the straight, yeah. Nudging 100 up there. Onto the brakes. Oh, the turn-in is not as initially crisp as it is in the ST170.
Nevertheless, by the first checkpoint, the ST280 is half a second ahead of the older car.
Fingers on the flappy paddles then, into third. Onto the brakes.
By the second checkpoint, the newer car's lead has opened up to 4.5 seconds.
A highly competent car.
Stop the clock. The ST280 crosses the line in 50.84 seconds, which, wait for it, is almost 7 seconds quicker than the 2002 machine. Around a lap that's less than a mile long, this is not simply a win, but an annihilation, and just shows how much the ST has progressed in terms of grip, power, brakes, balance, well, you name it.
This time we're getting down and dirty with 2 Japanese rally-inspired beasts. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 7, or Evo 7 as it's better known, and a Toyota Yaris GR. The FQ300 was the fastest version of the Evo 7 when it was launched in 2002. In fact, when Fifth Gear put it on track against another highly rated rally-bred machine, the Subaru Impreza WRX, it was a full 2 seconds quicker. Fast forward 2 decades, and we've got Toyota's take on a rally car for the road. Although, this is not my first encounter with the Yaris GR, because I first drove it 2 years ago. Come on, baby! On that day, it blew a top-spec Toyota Sleeker firmly into the weeds and left me with this conclusion. This little Yaris is without doubt my new favourite hot hatch. But I've got a feeling the Mitsubishi will give the Toyota something a bit tougher to chew on. Let's start by rolling back the years.
If you're a rally fan of a certain age, you'll remember that in the late 90s, it was dominated by the Evo. In fact, a pal of mine, the great Tommy Mackinnon, won 4 WRC titles on the bounce, all in Evos. Man, it's just mega! Now, it's so successful that Mitsubishi produced 10 versions from 1992 and eventually hung up their hats in 2016.
And it's not hard to see why these cars were so popular.
You know, sensible money got you a practical 4-door saloon that could see off pretty much anything on the roads.
Particularly if you had an FQ300.
Yeah, the 2-litre turbocharged engine produced nearly 310 horsepower in a body shell that weighed 1,360 kilos. And by today's standards, and that's light.
The result is a 0 to 62 time of 5.1 seconds and a top speed of 157 miles an hour. But as the Evo is first and foremost a rally car, the emphasis is not so much on traffic light stats, but being sure-footed.
Maximising grip on loose or slippery surfaces is all about directing power to the wheels which can best use it. Hence why this is four-wheel drive.
But it goes much further than that.
Now, also had an active centre diff, which could distribute the power front or back, depending on what was needed. And there's also a trick bit of kit in the rear axle, which is active yaw control, where it could actually individually put more power to one wheel to help the car turn.
And then there's another diff on the front axle to make sure the left or right wheel doesn't spin unnecessarily.
All clever stuff. Now, you know, even on tarmac, you can feel these systems, like there. You can feel it transfer power from the front to the rear of the car. You know, on really slippery surfaces, you'd really notice it.
And there's plenty of stopping power thanks to Brembo brakes all round.
Now, back in the day when this car was new, you know, the brakes were amazing. Obviously, this one's had a bit of work, and the brakes are a bit noisy, quite a lot of brake judder, probably because they're a bit warped.
The FQ300 also benefited from a freer flowing air filter and revised exhaust to help the engine breathe better. This was supposed to reduce turbo lag, but remember, we are talking about a 20-year-old car.
Now, these cars had pretty big turbos, and yeah, I mean, there is lag, definitely. Nothing like a modern turbo. But you know what? It's quite fun because then you end up anticipating and getting on the power a bit earlier than you normally would, waiting for the boost to build. Makes it fun to drive, actually. These cars, you know, the Evo, the Subaru, back in the day, but particularly this, breathtaking in terms of the way they handled, the way they drove. I mean, really pointy front end, great grip, brilliant balance, but also just make you feel alive. You know, they're quick, they move around a bit. They're just epic.
Well, they are epic until the brakes fail.
Whoa, yeah. Whoa, 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 whoa.
It turns out the brake fluid had boiled in all the excitement. However, after a brief cool-off, normal service was restored and I set off for a fast lap.
Get on the gas, right. Power, power, power. Come on, JP, flat over crest. Right, start the watch. You know what, I do feel like Tommy Mackinnon. God, it's quick. Right, here we go, coming to the line. Stop the watch.
The Evo 7 crosses the line in 48.58 seconds. Now, did any of the eagle-eyed amongst you spot anything unusual about this car's number plate?
Now, would you believe this is exactly the same car that we drove 20 years ago?
Next, the Yaris.
Like the Evo did 20 years ago, the Yaris GR is being campaigned in the World Rally Championship, but let's not kid ourselves. You know, those cars are a million miles away from the Yaris you can get at the Toyota dealership.
So this GR comes with all the safety tech, soundproofing and luxury fitments we've come to expect from modern day production cars. And that means, well, it's quite hefty.
Now, I remarked earlier that the Evo was pretty light at 1360 kilos. And to put that into context, this Yaris is half a metre shorter, and yet it's only 50 kilograms lighter. So this is you know, for its size, a heavy little car.
And although the GR is still the most powerful three-cylinder car you can buy, with 260 horsepower at its disposal, it's still giving away 50 horses to the Mitsubishi.
Now, crunch the numbers basically means that this Yaris has got a lower power to weight ratio than the Evo.
And why is this stat so important?
Because it's the ultimate comparison figure when comparing two cars. You know, if this car had twice the power, but also twice the weight, it wouldn't be any quicker. In fact, it'd be slower because mass doesn't want to slow down and doesn't want to change direction.
So perhaps it's no surprise that the Yaris is nearly half a second slower to 62 than the Evo, although the Toyota will benefit from the optional circuit pack that's been fitted.
This pack doesn't add any power, but it does add torsion differentials front and rear and a stiffer setup on the suspension, which ultimately is going to mean it's going to corner better and it's going to have better traction.
It also adds £3.5 grand to the price tag, bringing the GR to £35,000. Mind you, that's only £4,000 more than the Evo 7 cost back in 2002.
Let's get set up for a hot lap. Start the watch. It's got a phenomenal grip.
By the first checkpoint, the Yaris is half a second ahead.
You know, in this track mode, it's 50-50 torque split. It's brilliant. The front's really tight, holds the line. And this is going to blow apart the Evo, I reckon.
By the second checkpoint, that lead has stretched to 3/4 of a second.
The front tucks in. Now I can feel the rear moving a little bit. Wow. It's a really beautiful balance. Proper thing. Stop the watch.
The Yaris crosses the line in 47.15 seconds, which is 1.4 seconds faster than the Evo. So the new car wins by a good margin around this short Landau circuit. The Evo is still a very quick car and huge fun to drive, but it simply can't compete with the little Toyota's astonishing balance, mega brakes and super glue grip.
I mean, I loved it when I drove it a couple of years ago. Still love it.
This time, we've gathered two of the world's most legendary names when it comes to sports coupes, both of which are Japanese. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Nissan 350Z and the latest Toyota Supra. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. I know I will. We'll start with the olden.
Nissan, then under the guise of Datsun, launched its first Z car in 1969. Z meant sporty. And whilst not every Z car was a blinding success, this fifth generation one ticked all the right boxes.
The 350Z first appeared on UK shores in 2003. However, Fifth Gear managed to grab the keys a year earlier during a trip to the States. It's fair to say we liked it, and so did the public.
4,000 lucky UK buyers registered their interest before it even went on sale, and then they paid just £24,000 for the privilege, which was half the price of a Porsche 911 then.
But you certainly didn't get half the performance.
The 3.5-litre V6 puts out 280 horsepower with no turbo. And although it is as beefy as it looks in the weight department at around 1,500 kilograms, it can still scoot to 62 in 5.9 seconds and on to 155.
And before you complain that the particular car I have has an additional boot spoiler, today that won't really make a difference to the performance.
Often, the simple recipes are the best. A big, normally aspirated engine up front, a rear-wheel drive chassis and a 6-speed gearbox. And oh, what a gearbox. I had forgotten just how brilliant this is. It's short, it's precise, it's neat, it's pucker. I wish every gearbox felt like this.
Thankfully, the car is not too basic, and Nissan threw in ABS and traction control to help tame the brute. Though access to a track allows me a little more freedom.
So I have turned the traction control off, but I still have to be a little careful. Oh.
Well, not that careful. The instruction to the car's designers from Nissan's head honchos was, it should look the way it drives and drive the way it looks.
I love this car!
It certainly satisfies the brief from where I'm sitting.
Oh, yes, old friend, I have missed you. Oh, the joy and the excitement that this car gives me is exactly the same as it was when I first drove one. And also, this car has just got that extra little bit of steering lock that when you're sideways and you think, oh, I can't do it anymore, the car just gives you a little bit more steering and then you can hold on to that slide. Yes, I remember that really, really well.
Anyway, to business. Time for a hot lap.
Here we go. Such a strong engine. I need to be neat and tidy and not slidey. Oh my gosh. The brakes, I would like them to be a little bit beefier actually, particularly round a circuit. Oh.
The Nissan 350Z crosses the line in 55.2 seconds. Time for the Supra.
On to a modern day car now, and if you're wondering why we're not comparing the old Z to a new Z, it's because, well, Nissan doesn't make them anymore. Well, it does, but none that are available in Blighty.
In fact, the Japanese car manufacturers have just about given up making sports coupes these days, apart, that is, from Toyota.
The Supra name first appeared on a Celica in 1978. However, in 1986, the Supra had its own designated model, and 4 versions were made until 2002, when Toyota had a little snooze.
Then, in 2019, they woke up again and started making this.
Well, I say making loosely because a large chunk of this car is BMW. The Z4, to be exact.
Yes, underneath me, the engine, running gear, suspension, brakes are all very German. And, for that matter, a lot of the electrics inside the car.
Of course, Toyota has tuned the car a little differently, and the bodywork is a world away from the BMWs. And you can't get a coupe in the Z4, so if you want a tin top over your head, then this is the car to have.
This Supra was initially launched with a 3-litre engine, but recently Toyota has added this, a 2-litre model, and at £48,000, it's £8,000 cheaper.
And of course, unsurprising in this day and age, it is turbocharged.
In case you are wondering, the noise it makes is augmented. But before I get too dismayed, let's check it out. First impressions aren't great.
Oh, I'm missing the dramatics. I feel so much more disconnected to the road than I did in the 350Z. I feel like I'm sort of floating on top of a bit of a duvet.
Nevertheless, this car is a lot quicker. Although it has a bit less power than the 350Z at around 260 horsepower, it's 130 kilos lighter, so has a superior power-to-weight ratio. Like the Nissan, it's also rear-wheel drive. However, 0 to 62 is dispatched in 5.2 seconds, which is 0.7 seconds faster than the older car.
That lighter engine also helps the weight distribution, so it's 50-50 front and rear, which is perfect in many people's books. Spicy. As for the gearbox, there is no manual option, so you have to make do with this 8-speed one, which is a pretty slick and quick affair. Supra in Latin means to surpass or to go beyond. So, will this Toyota surpass the lap time of the Nissan 350Z?
Start the clock.
The brakes are much bolder and stronger.
By the first checkpoint, the Supra is 1.7 seconds ahead of the Nissan.
Oh, it's definitely quicker. Definitely. Oh yeah, the brakes are so much better.
By the second checkpoint, the newer car's lead has grown to 3.2 seconds.
This car is very neat and tidy and precise.
Stop the clock. The Toyota Supra crosses the line in 50.46 seconds, which is 4.7 seconds faster than the 350Z. If it's entertainment you're after, the Nissan is still the car to go for. But when it comes to outright speed, there's no denying the Supra is superior, particularly in the braking department, and shows how far Japanese coupes have progressed in 20 years.